Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights.
Hey everyone!
Today we're tackling a big one. We're taking a deep dive into the revolutionary ideas of Nobel Prize laureate Daniel Kahneman.
Yes, based on his massive bestseller, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Exactly. And this isn't just, a book. It's really the culmination of like 5 decades of absolutely groundbreaking psychological research.
It really gives us this powerful new vocabulary, a new way to understand the hidden machinery of our minds.
Yeah, the stuff going on behind the scenes.
Right. So our mission today is basically to unpack the core insights from Kahneman's work. We want to give you some practical tools.
Tools for what, exactly?
Well, think of it as a shortcut to maybe diagnosing those predictable errors in judgment and decision-making.
Both in our own lives and, when we're looking at what others are doing.
Precisely.
Okay, I like that. Because we're going to uncover some genuinely surprising facts, I think. We'll challenge some of those widely accepted ideas about human rationality.
Oh, definitely.
And hopefully equip you with insights to make, better choices.
Yeah.
And maybe even understand your own well-being on a much deeper level.
It should be a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. So let's start with the book itself, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's described as more than just science, right? Like an intellectual memoir.
Yeah, it is. And it's really crafted for a mainstream audience, not just academics. The goal is to give us all a common language to talk about how we really make decisions and judgments.
And what's truly remarkable, I think, is where it all came from.
You mean the collaboration?
Yeah, his incredibly profound collaboration with his late friend and fellow psychologist, Amos Tversky. It started way back in 1969.
That's right. They shared this deep curiosity about intuition versus statistics, which was actually a pretty radical perspective back then.
And they really did turn the academic world on its head, didn't they?
They certainly did. Their 1974 article, Judgment Under Uncertainty, Heuristics and Biases, it was a bombshell. It systematically showed how our minds consistently make these predictable errors. It flew right in the face of the dominant view at the time that humans were purely rational beings.
Okay. And then came prospect theory.
Yes, just a decade later. Their paper, Prospect Theory, an analysis of decision under risk, became an absolute cornerstone of behavioral economics. It fundamentally reshaped how we think about risk and choice.
The impact was so huge that Kahneman actually got the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences for it in 2002.
Which is pretty rare for a psychologist, right? That really speaks to how far-reaching their ideas were crossing disciplines.
Definitely. And Kahneman himself, professor emeritus at Princeton, his own background is fascinating, a childhood in Paris during the Nazi occupation.
You have to wonder how that might have subtly shaped his perspective on human psychology, on judgment.
Absolutely. And the book itself, the reception was incredible.
Oh, yeah. Glowing praise. The Wall Street Journal called it a tour de force of psychological insight.
I remember the Financial Times saying it was one of the greatest and most engaging collections of insights into the human mind I have ever read. High praise indeed.
It landed on all of those best books of 2011 lists, and on Goodreads, something like 93% of readers liked it. Many called it life-changing.
Wow. And wasn't there a connection to Michael Lewis, the Moneyball guy?
Yes. This is really interesting. Lewis called Kahneman the world's most distinguished living psychologist, but he also admitted that Kahneman and Tversky's ideas were all over Moneyball without him even realizing it at first.
How did that happen?
Well, Paul DePodesta, the assistant GM in Moneyball, had actually studied behavioral economics at Harvard. He was consciously applying Kahneman and Tversky's concepts to baseball scouting, using stats over intuition.
So the ideas were already out there, influencing things in unexpected ways.
Exactly. Lewis put it perfectly. When you wander into the work of Kahneman and Tversky far enough, you come to find their fingerprints in places you never imagined even existed.
That's a powerful statement. But look, it wasn't universally loved, right? Like any big work. It had critics.
True. Some reviewers found parts a bit, tedious or clunky. Michael Lewis himself kind of admitted Kahneman's terminology could be tough, maybe blaming psychologists in general for that.
Hey, okay, fair enough. Any deeper criticisms?
Yeah, a few. William Easterly in the FT questioned sort of the practicality of applying it broadly. He argued that the experts overseeing things like retirement plans are just as prone to these cognitive biases as the rest of us.
That's a fair point. If everyone's biased, who guides the guides?
Right. And Janice Grostein also questioned the idea of urging people to remove emotion from decisions when, Well, emotion is part of our actual experience, our experiencing self, as Kahneman later calls it.
Okay, so we have these critiques, even Lewis admitting the language can be dense. Does that undermine the core ideas for you?
I don't think it does. That's a great question, because the consensus seems to be, no, the core insights hold strong. The Economist summed it up nicely, saying, Kahneman showed, we are not the paragons of reason we assume ourselves to be. They put him up there with giants like Copernicus and Darwin for changing how we see ourselves.
Wow.
So these critiques really highlight the challenge of acting on the insights, not that the insights themselves are flawed. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It's one thing to know about the bias, another to actually overcome it consistently.
Exactly.
Okay, so with that solid foundation laid, let's dive into maybe Kahneman's most famous contribution, the two systems, System 1 and System 2. He even calls them agents in our minds.
That's right. And System 1 is the star, really. He calls it the hero of the book.
Why the hero?
Because it's lightning fast, it's intuitive, automatic, always on. It's constantly handling our perception, our memory. Most of our beliefs, our choices, they actually start right here.
Like ducking when a ball flies at you, or knowing 2 + 2 + 4 instantly.
Precisely. That's System 1. Effortless.
And System 2, that's the other guy.
Yeah, that's our slow, effortful, deliberate thinker. System 2 is what handles the complex mental stuff. Tough calculations, focusing attention, exercising self-control.
It's the part we think of as us, our rational self, doing the hard work.
Right. But here's the crucial interaction, the real kicker. System 1 is constantly feeding suggestions to System 2. Impressions, intuitions, intentions, feelings.
Okay.
But System 2 is, well, fundamentally lazy. It often just accepts these suggestions from System 1 without much, if any, scrutiny.
So we end up believing we made a careful, rational choice, but really System 1 did the quick work and System 2 just signed off.
Pretty much. And Kahneman points out you can actually see System 2 working when it's forced to engage. Pupils dilate, heart rate goes up, you get absorbed. That's cognitive strain.
That's fascinating. And System 1, the fast one, it has its own quirks and biases, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's always building these mental models of reality, making automatic associations, which is useful, helps us navigate quickly. But when something unexpected happens, System 1 tends to try and force it into its existing model, rather than admitting uncertainty or complexity. That's really System 2's job, but System 2 is often, off duty.
Which leads to things like the halo effect.
Exactly. System 1 jumps to conclusions based on first impressions. We see someone who's confident and we just assume they're competent in everything. Or someone smiles and we think they must be trustworthy.
System 1 paints the whole picture from one little detail.
And System 2 often doesn't bother to check if the picture is accurate.
Another big one you mentioned is WYSIAD. What you see is all there is.
Yes. This is so pervasive. It's not just about missing information. It's about how confident we can feel based on very limited, sometimes completely wrong information.
Because System 1 just creates a coherent story from whatever's easily available.
Right. And that creates cognitive ease. It feels right, so we become overconfident. We feel certain even when we should be very uncertain.
System 1 also uses shortcuts, right? Substitution and heuristics.
Absolutely. Faced with a hard question, like, how happy are you with your life overall? System 1 might swap it for an easier one. Like, what's my mood right now? It gives a quick answer that feels relevant, and lazy System 2 often accepts it without noticing the switch. It's an approximation, not the real answer.
Okay, and we absolutely have to talk about the anchoring effect. This seems huge in daily life.
It is huge. When you hear an initial number, say, the asking price for a house, it powerfully influences your own estimate of its value, even if that first number was totally arbitrary.
Why does that happen?
System 1 just grabs onto it. It unconsciously adjusts subsequent thinking around that anchor. It creates a context where that initial value seems plausible, even correct.
And this connects to something called the illusion of validity, feeling overly confident because of that anchor.
Precisely. System 1 feels comfortable with the anchor, so you feel confident in your judgment, even though it's heavily biased by that initial, perhaps irrelevant piece of information.
So next time I see a limit 10 per customer sign,
that number 10 is an anchor. Your System 2 needs to consciously step in and ask, how many do I actually need? Not, is 10 a good deal?
Right, got it. Can we look at some classic examples? The Linda problem comes up a lot.
Yes, a brilliant illustration of the conjunction fallacy. Kahneman described Linda 31, outspoken philosophy major, concerned about social justice, anti-nuclear protests, etc.
Okay, I remember this.
Then he asked people, Is it more likely that Linda is A, a bank teller, or B, a bank teller and active in the feminist movement?
And most people pick B, right? Even though logically, B is a subset of A, so it has to be less probable.
Exactly. Their System 1 was swayed by the descriptive details fitting the feminist stereotype. It felt more representative, more plausible, even though it violated a basic rule of probability. System 2 just didn't catch the logical error.
You know, the part of the book that really blew me away was about priming, how unconscious these influences are.
Oh yeah, that stuff is wild. It really shows how little conscious control we sometimes have.
Like the eat and SP example. Here, eat. You're more likely to think soup than soap.
Right. Eat primes the concept of food in your mind totally unconsciously.
But it goes way beyond word games, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This isn't just a party trick. Studies show these priming effects can influence significant behaviors. Voting in a school makes people more likely to support school funding.
Wow.
Thinking about money can subtly make people act more selfishly. Being reminded of death can make people more receptive to authoritarian ideas, maybe seeking security.
So System 2 thinks it's driving the bus.
But System 1 is constantly, subtly tweaking the GPS, hiding the inner workings from our conscious awareness.
Okay, so how can we use this right away? What are some immediate takeaways for you listening?
Well, first, just stop and think, especially when multitasking. Think about texting while driving.
Right. Kahneman talks about cognitive strain.
Yeah, you can hum and drive, maybe. Two simple tasks. But picking up a phone, finding an app, typing that demands System 2. It creates cognitive strain, forces you to channel energy, and pulls focus dramatically from the road. Recognizing that strain is key.
Okay, what else?
Simplify things. System 2 gets tired easily. If a task seems too hard, it might just give up.
So break it down.
Exactly. Break down complex problems, whether it's math or a project, into smaller, manageable steps. This helps overcome System 2's laziness, builds momentum, and actually gets things done.
Right. Instead of just getting overwhelmed and defaulting to System 1's easier, maybe wrong answer.
Precisely.
Okay, so what does all this mean for how we act? Especially, say, with our money or thinking about our own well-being.
Well, the fundamental takeaway is this. Humans are not econs.
Econs.
Yeah, that's Kahneman's term for the perfectly rational, self-interested agents that traditional economics assumed we were. His work just demolishes that idea.
Because our emotions and these intuitive shortcuts play a much bigger role.
A much, much bigger role, especially when dealing with financial choices, risk, and particularly the fear of loss.
This goes against older ideas, like utility theory.
Directly. Utility theory, going back to Daniel Bernoulli centuries ago, suggested people value things based on utility or psychological value. But Kahneman points out a huge flaw. It ignores the reference point.
Can you give that example again? The two people with $5 million?
Sure. Person A has $5 million today, but had $9 million yesterday. Person B also has $5 million today, but had only $1 million yesterday.
Utility theory says they're equally happy.
Right, because they have the same absolute wealth, but that's absurd. Person A having lost $4 million would be miserable. Person B having gained $4 million would be ecstatic. Their feelings depend entirely on their starting point, their reference point.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, and that's where prospect theory comes in.
Exactly. Kahneman and Tversky developed it to address this. It defines outcomes not in absolute terms, but as gains and losses relative to that reference point. And critically, it shows that losses loom larger than gains.
The pain of losing is stronger than the pleasure of winning the same amount.
Much stronger. Which brings us to the huge power of loss aversion.
This explains so much, I think, like the endowment effect.
Yes. The wine bottle example is classic. Professor R owns a bottle he bought for, say, $35. Professor T wants to buy it and offers $100.
Okay.
Professor R, because he owns it, feels the potential pain of loss if he sells it. Professor T, who doesn't own it, only considers the pleasure of gain.
So Professor R demands more to sell than Professor T is willing to pay, even though objectively it's the same bottle.
Often, yes. The pain of giving something up just feels more intense than the pleasure of acquiring it. It's irrational by econ standards, but very human.
And this loss aversion makes us do other irrational things.
Definitely. We expend way more effort to avoid a potential loss than to achieve an equivalent gain. We overweight the probability of rare, scary events like terrorism because the potential loss feels so significant, even if it's statistically tiny.
It also affects finances, right? These mental accounts.
Yes, that's a form of narrow framing. We treat money differently depending on which mental box we put it in. This leads to things like the disposition effect.
Selling winning stocks too early, but holding on to losers too long.
Right. We hate locking in a loss, even if it's the rational move. And the sunk cost fallacy, pouring more money into a failing project just because you've already invested so much, you're trying to avoid the pain of admitting the initial investment was a loss.
So how do we fight this? Anticipate regret.
That's one strategy Kahneman suggests. Explicitly thinking about potential regret can sometimes help clarify choices.
And what about the framing effect, how choices are presented?
Another massive influence. Presenting the exact same financial outcome differently can totally change our choices.
Like the lottery ticket example.
Yeah. Option A, 10% chance to win $95, 90% chance to lose $5. Option B, pay $5 for a lottery ticket with a 10% chance to win $100, 90% chance to win nothing.
Mathematically identical outcomes.
But most people prefer option B, the lottery ticket. The framing of paying $5 for a chance to win feels different, less like a direct loss than the frame involving a 90% chance of losing $5.
Even though System 2 should see they're the same.
But it's lazy. And as Kahneman says, we rarely get the chance to see how much our preferences are shaped by the frame rather than the reality.
So what's the counter strategy here? Broad framing.
Yes. Combining an outside view looking at statistical outcomes of similar situations with a risk policy, instead of deciding case by case, narrow framing, you adopt a broader approach.
Like deciding to review your stocks quarterly, accepting some losses will happen, rather than reacting emotionally to every daily dip.
Exactly. That broader frame helps manage loss aversion. It also relates to the fourfold pattern he describes.
Which is?
Basically, how our risk tolerance flips depending on probability and on whether it's a gain or loss. We tend to be risk-averse for probable gains, take the sure settlement, but risk-seeking for probable losses, gamble to avoid a sure loss.
But the opposite for long shots.
Right. Risk-seeking for unlikely gains, buy lottery tickets, but risk-averse for unlikely losses,
Right.
buy insurance. System 1's intuitions about risk are complex and context-dependent.
Okay, so a practical application. That mattress upsell. Flame retardant.
Right. Hold the flame retardant. Broaden the frame. Ask, how likely is a fire where this specific spray is the crucial difference? Even if it works, the mattress is likely smoke damaged anyway.
A carbon monoxide detector seems like a more rational safety investment based on actual risk.
Probably, yes. It's about stepping back from the narrow frame of the sales pitch.
Another application. Thinking about your reference point for happiness.
Absolutely. You get that 10% raise, you feel great, then you hear your colleague, same job, makes 20% more.
Suddenly that raise doesn't feel so good.
Your reference point shifted. Your happiness isn't just about your absolute situation, it's heavily influenced by these comparisons that System 1 constantly makes.
Which leads us perfectly into Kahneman's idea of the two selves. This is really mind-bending stuff.
It really is. The experiencing self versus the remembering self. He argues we essentially have these two distinct modes of evaluating our lives, and they don't always agree.
Okay, break that down. The experiencing self.
That's the self living life moment by moment, feeling the pain, the pleasure, the boredom as it happens. But crucially, this self doesn't really keep score or tell the story afterwards. It just experiences.
And the remembering self.
That's the storyteller. It's the one that looks back, evaluates experiences, and makes decisions about the future based on those memories.
But the remembering self has flaws.
Big ones. Kahneman highlights two main biases, duration neglect and the peak end rule.
Meaning?
The remembering self doesn't really care how long an experience lasted. A short, intense pain might be remembered as worse than a long, mild discomfort. It also heavily weights the peak moment, most intense, and the end of an experience when forming the overall memory.
So a fantastic vacation can be ruined in your memory by a bad flight home.
Exactly. Or a mediocre meal saved by an amazing dessert. The ending disproportionately shapes the memory the remembering self holds on to.
Which means our memories aren't always reliable guides for future choices.
Not as reliable as we think. That symphony example from the book is perfect. A long, enjoyable performance.
But with a terrible screeching sound at the very end due to a bad recording.
Right. And the listener later judges the entire experience negatively based almost entirely on that awful ending peak end rule, ignoring the long duration of enjoyment, duration neglect. His remembering self created a distorted summary.
Wow. So how do we even measure true happiness then?
Well, Kahneman tried to get closer to the experiencing self with his U-index.
The unpleasant index.
Yes, basically. It measures the proportion of time a person spends in an unpleasant state during their waking hours. If you spend, say, 4 hours out of 16 feeling stressed or unhappy, your U-index is 25%.
And reducing commute time could significantly lower that.
Potentially, yes. If commuting is a major source of unpleasantness, cutting it could have your U index. It's an attempt to measure lived experience, not just remembered satisfaction.
What about the big question? Money and happiness.
Kahneman's research found something really interesting there. For experienced well-being, how happy you feel moment-to-moment income increases happiness up to a point. Around $75,000 household income in the U.S. at the time of the study,
And beyond that.
more money didn't seem to buy more experienced happiness. Maybe because extreme wealth diminishes the pleasure found in smaller everyday things.
And this is the twist, people with higher incomes did report greater life satisfaction.
Exactly. Life satisfaction is a judgment made by the remembering self. So you might not feel happier day to day beyond 75K, but when you step back and think about your life, having more money makes you rate it higher. It clearly shows the difference between the two selves.
And this relates to things like effective forecasting, predicting future happiness.
Yes. We often predict, for example, that buying a new car or moving to California will make us much happier long term. That's effective forecasting.
But it often doesn't work out that way.
Right. The thrill fades, hedonic adaptation. Or we fall victim to a focusing illusion. We overemphasize the one factor we changed, like the weather in California, and ignore all the other things that actually determine our well-being day to day.
So we need a view of happiness that considers both selves.
Kahneman argues strongly for that. Understanding both the quality of our lived experience and the stories our remembering self tells about it gives a much richer picture of well-being.
Okay, so bringing this home, how can you listening apply this to improve your own well-being?
First, actively work to improve your U index. Identify those activities that consistently put you in an unpleasant state. Maybe it's commuting, maybe it's certain chores, and find ways to reduce their duration or make them less unpleasant.
And conversely,
Actively increase time spent on things known to boost experienced well-being. Things like socializing with friends, exercise, engaging hobbies. Focus on the quality of your actual moments.
what about using the peak-end rule knowledge?
You could think about reading the peaks in situations. Let's say you've had a great few weeks at work, hitting targets.
Okay, time for that bonus talk.
Maybe wait. If your boss just heard some bad news about overall company sales, their peak-end experience is negative right now. Your individual success might get overshadowed by that recent negative peak in their remembering self's assessment.
Timing matters because of memory bias. Interesting.
It's about being aware of how these memory quirks might influence others' judgments and your own.
Okay, let's wrap this up. As we finish this deep dive, what are the absolute key takeaways from Kahneman's incredible work?
Well, first I'd say it's that profound understanding of the two ways we think. System 1, fast, intuitive, powerful, but seriously error-prone. And System 2, slow, deliberate, capable of logic, but fundamentally lazy.
And just knowing about them is the first step, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing their interplay helps you start to catch your own thinking errors.
Absolutely. Second, the fundamental truth. Humans are not econs. Our emotions, our intuitions, driven by System 1, play a massive role, especially around risk and loss. We make predictable errors, even experts do.
But the good news is just consciously slowing down, engaging System 2, broadening our perspective, these things can lead to more rational choices.
Definitely. And finally, that powerful, almost unsettling distinction between our experiencing self and our remembering self.
Realizing that our memory, our remembering self, gives us a potentially biased report card on our own lives, focusing on peaks and ends, ignoring duration. That's huge.
It is. Understanding both selves is crucial if you want an accurate picture of your own happiness and want to make future choices that truly improve your lived experience, not just the story you tell yourself later.
Kahneman really believed this research had practical applications everywhere, didn't he?
He strongly believed so. From individuals diagnosing their own flaws in thinking, all the way up to informing public policy to improve global well-being. He even suggested adding national well-being metrics focused on experience could significantly reduce suffering.
That's a powerful vision. And even on a personal level, the ability to diagnose potential flaws in our own decision-making that has immediate value.
Absolutely. Just slowing down before big decisions, consciously asking your System 2 for help, seeking out broader data, considering the frame. It can prevent real errors.
It seems like, as you've learned in this deep dive, even quite small adjustments in how we approach thinking can lead to pretty profound differences in our decisions and ultimately our well-being.
Couldn't agree more.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. What's one small area of your life where you could consciously try to engage your lazy System 2 more often? Or Where could you deliberately consider both your experiencing and remembering selves to make a more informed choice, or maybe just boost your authentic moment-to-moment happiness?